All right, welcome to the city of St. George. That's right, feel free to cheer. You're on YouTube and Facebook right now, and you're in a church, so use the Christian language. Welcome to the city of St. George is important. It's something we say generally every time we talk to you about St. George, and the beauty of what we're doing now is it's a master plan process for what welcome to the city of St. George is going to mean for the next 20, 30, 50 years. And that's why tonight and events like tonight are so important. Having you a part of the process is so important because it's your opportunity to learn. It's your opportunity to implement and enforce and build the city that we've been promising now for 15 years, that we've worked all the way through the Louisiana Supreme Court to build, and that now we have the reality of getting to build our city. And so in a time where a study years ago said that 80% of East Baton Rouge Parish families didn't want their children to live here when they became adults, we now have an opportunity to change that dynamic and change the future for not just the city of St. George, but also for East Baton Rouge Parish as a whole. I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's immensely important for you to be a part of this process. This is your city. These are your tax dollars. This has been your fight, and this is your reward. You get to craft your city for the future. Before we get too far into it, I want to really thank Grace Life Fellowship for allowing us to be here. This is the second event we've had here. It's a world-class facility. It's a wonderful church. And what better way and how we start every St. George event and function. I'd like to have Pastor Tim come up here and lead us in prayer.
Thank you for being here. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the city of St. George. We thank you for the vision and the work and the heart that's gone into this. And we pray for its leaders, its mayor, the community at large, Father, that you, who in this season that we celebrate peace, hope, and love, you would found this city on those very same principles. Father, that as we recognize your Son, our Savior, that we as a people of St. George would find this community to be one that is one of joy, Father, one of humility. And we thank you for everybody present this evening, braving the weather to be here. And Father, we pray that you would bless everything that goes into the planning of this city, that it would give everyone present a hope in the future of what's happening. And we praise you for that. And as we think of you and your love for us in this season that we celebrate the birth of your Son, we find the comfort and joy that comes from only you. May you bless everybody here tonight, Father, and all the hands and all the hearts in the vision of St. George. In your name, amen.
Thank you. It's one of the wonderful parts of St. George is that we have such a wonderful faith-based community that we can draw on and rely on, and Grace Life Fellowship is certainly at the top of that list. So thank you, Pastor Tim. Right now, I'd like to have Mayor Dustin Yates come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Drew. To echo what Drew said, thanks so much for showing up here tonight and being a part of this really historic process. And we say this quite often with St. George that we have a lot of firsts, and we're not even close to being to the end of that line of first events. But this is our first comprehensive land use plan that we ever get to embark on for the city of St. George. And as we enter into this plan. What I encourage everybody to do as they go through the plan and they sit here and they listen and they learn, and I use this quite a bit when I talk, and I use it in terms of what government can be and what government has been historically, especially in East Baton Rouge parishes. You know, we have been given things that were based off of probabilities, and now we're in a time and an era where we have to look at what's possible. What's possible to do with local government? What's possible to do with planning? What's possible to do with public works? What's possible to do with service delivery? What's possible in a master plan for the city of St. George? It's not necessarily looking at something one particular way and seeing it in a way that it currently is, but how we want that to look in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years. Mr. Drew's point earlier, what we build here today is not for us. What we build here today is for the generation that comes after and the generation that comes after that. And what an unbelievable opportunity, what an unbelievable experience that is to go through that with our community as we move forward with this plan. You know, when I think about the journey that we've been on together, and it took us 12 years to get a city. It's taken us the last year to get that city up and functional. And as I stand here today, every operation that we have in the city is fully operational and functional, from planning to permitting to inspections to now finally public works. And what an exciting time that is. A little side story about public works. A year ago, okay, when we just embarked in this process to get a pothole filled, it would have taken an act of Congress. I would have had to call somebody who would have had to call somebody else who would have had to call somebody else, and maybe 45 days later that pothole gets filled. I had a gentleman call me the other day, said, hey, there's a pothole on this particular road. It's an issue. I made one phone call. Within 2 hours, the pothole's filled. And that's important. Every now and again during this process, we have these moments. I for sure know that I have these moments where you say, this is why we did what we did. And as we move forward, the master plan is a huge part of that. And that was always a part of the issue of why we wanted to have our own city, was that we wanted to control our own destiny. We wanted to control our own land use. We want to control where the St. George downtown is going to be. We want to control what our residential development looks like. We want to control all these things, and we want to control them here on a local level. So with all that being said, I think you'll enjoy what we have here for you tonight, and we'll bring up the speaker for the evening, Mr. Jeff Speck.
Hold on, I got to introduce him properly real quick. He's more than just Jeff Speck. You just don't know. So one of the great things about St. George is we promised you we were going to look beyond the borders, and we were going to look beyond the state, and we were going to give you something that was best in class. And that didn't mean next door. It doesn't mean around the corner. It doesn't mean Louisiana. It means best in class wherever that is. And if you're going to do that, you have to bring in best in class. And that's what we've done with Jeff Speck. He's a partner at Speck Dempsey. If you look at book sales and video sales, this is the most well-read city planner in the world. Suburban Nation, which Mr. Speck wrote, was the best-selling planning title of the 2000s. The Wall Street Journal called it the Urbanist Bible. Maybe sacrilegious in here, maybe not. In 2012, it was published. Walkable City was the dominant planning title of its decade. Named the second best urban planning book of all time, been translated into 8 languages. In 2018, Walkable City Rules 101 Steps to Making Better Places has already been translated into 6 languages. For those of you who love TED Talks, he gives them. And you can watch his YouTube videos, and they've been seen more than 6 million times. Hopefully he can give us some tips on getting the St. George page that many views. In a recent planetization poll, he was voted one of the most influential urbanists of all time. Formerly director of design at the National Endowment for the Arts, Mr. Speck is a partner in Speck Dempsey, an urban planning firm based in Boston. Last year, he celebrated the 10th anniversary of Walkable City with a brand new edition with 8 chapters that he'll also be signing in the lobby tonight. So again, we brought in best in class to plan a best in class city, and to do that, we're going to listen to Mr. Jeff Speck.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Wow. That was great. And Mayor Yates, thank you. And I should mention, I'm part of a big team. I think you've met some of the other team members before. You'll be meeting some of them after me tonight as well. But we're working with ITBS, we're working with DDS, we're working with Lionheart, who made that incredible map that you see out in the lobby. And we're just a part of that team, but we're excited to be a part of it. And we work on the creation of new towns, but this is probably the first time I've worked on the creation of a new city in the sense that it's a new political entity. Like, we design new places, but the idea that you've actually created a new, what would you call it, municipality, it's the first time I've encountered that in my 30 years doing this work, so congratulations on that. I like to sometimes introduce myself by going a little bit back in time and telling my own story as someone who was studying architecture and thought they would be an architect for their career. I'm not an architect. I do design buildings for a hobby, but I can't stamp them, so I'm protected from lawsuits, so it's pretty perfect. But I had the experience in 1989 when I was about to go to architecture school of hearing this guy speak, Andres Duani. Have you ever heard Andres speak locally? I'll show you in a minute. I worked with him ultimately on the plan for downtown Baton Rouge many years after this. But in 1989, I heard him speak. And he was well known with his partner, Elizabeth Plater-Zyberk, because they had created this new town called Seaside in the Florida Panhandle. Has anyone here been to Seaside? A good number of you, okay. And in the architectural world, it was a big deal because it was the first new town that had been created in half a century that was designed on the model of old towns. Someone actually said, when you go to architecture school, which I did, you're taught to invent. And the more you invent, the smarter you are. But someone actually said at this point, both the developer Robert Davis and Andres and Liz, hey, why do we have to invent a new town? Why can't we make something based on all the places that we love the most? And if you look at the framework of Seaside and how it's put together, all of the different organizational principles, the mixed use, the intensity swelling towards the center, the different types of buildings, the civic structures, the school site, everything that made its plan was the goal of emulating what had traditionally made towns over time. And what happened when Seaside was built was that a lot of people realized that we weren't building these things anywhere else, and that we hadn't done so for decades. And so what began as an exercise to create a new town became a whole movement, which was what Andres was talking about in this lecture, where he basically said, look, there are certain kinds of places, think about your own life. There's certain kind of places you love and you like to spend time in, and there's other certain places you hate and don't like to spend time in. These places are fundamentally different from each other, and in fact, it's pretty much illegal to build the kind of places we love these days. And with that realization, I was kind of drawn into the conversation and joined the firm when I graduated architecture school in 1993, excuse me. So I had the chance then over the next decade, I spent a decade in Miami working on projects in Maryland and in Alabama and also Alabama and in Texas and in Florida, Rosemary Beach, which is the expansion of Seaside, which I should say not the expansion of Seaside, but the chance to do another Seaside type project 15 years later, which I managed at the firm, or in New Jersey, projects in Wisconsin, or in South Carolina, Colorado, Canada, and Mexico, and Belgium, and other places. And the new urbanists, which we became known as, or even before I arrived, the new urbanists were known for making these new towns. But in fact, a lot of the work that they did and we did was also downtown master plans. And so I worked on the plan for Fort Myers and for Sarasota, and also for Baton Rouge. And Plan Baton Rouge, which we finished, I think it was done around 2000. I think it was finished in 2000. The plan had about 105 implementation, not requirements. It had a list of 105 things that the plan was trying to accomplish, and within 10 years, about 95 of them were done. And it's actually a plan that we talk about nationally as one of the most effective and impactful plans. And the main reason it was successful was because of what became known as CPEX. Do you guys know the Center for Planning Excellence? And we actually learned a lesson from Plan Baton Rouge, which we teach other communities, which was because it was sponsored by the Baton Rouge Area Foundation, and they had the ability, the funding, and the desire to see it implemented, they created an office and a person to implement it. Does anyone know Boo Thomas? But Boo and Rachel DiResto and some other folks, they showed up to work every day with one job, and that was implementing the plan. And a lot of times when you do a plan for a city, they don't identify a person whose only job is to implement that plan. But that's what they did initially with Boo and then with Rachel as well and others at CPEX, which wasn't yet called CPEX. And that's why that plan was so impactful. So we were very proud of working on that. My time at hearing that talk that Andres gave in Boston that kind of opened my eyes, made me realize it needed to be a book. That book ended up being Suburban Nation, which was explained. And then look at the cover of this book. It says Andres, Liz, and Jeff. People read this and they thought that it was the three of us that figured it all out, when in fact it was Andres and Liz who had figured it all out, and I basically just wrote the book. But this was really good for me. So because of the book, I got appointed I got to move to Washington, D.C. I was appointed to the National Endowment for the Arts, where I ran the design division, which was most instrumental in that I got to oversee this program called the Mayor's Institute on City Design. I'm sure a number of past Baton Rouge mayors have gone there. This is a program where every 2 months, somewhere in the US, we would gather up 8 mayors, 8 designers. I would get to pick the designers. Each mayor would bring their most pressing urban design challenge, and then we'd sit around the table and try to solve the problems. And it was a great experience for me because I learned what the design challenges were that mayors were facing. Not long after that, when I left the NEA, mayors started hiring me. And my firm back then was just me, so I called it Speck & Associates. And worked on a number of fun plans, some of which I'll show you, like for downtown Oklahoma City or in Carmel, Indiana, which I'll be showing you towards the end of the talk. Based on that experience, I wrote Walkable City, which is probably the reason I'm here tonight, because most people who welcome me to speak in their communities, it's because someone read Walkable City and got a lot out of it. And so I'm calling tonight's talk because this is what matters to you. I'm calling it maybe this term doesn't matter to you, but hopefully this term encapsulates what your hopes are in this conversation, which is placemaking economics in St. George. Like, how do we use the design of place to be economically successful? But I have to admit that my talks are all about walkability, because I learned over time to frame best practices in planning through the window of walkability. And because my book's called Walkable City, and because I've kind of reorganized all my thinking around planning through that window of walkability, that is going to be the window that we use tonight. So the book Walkable City was written for everybody. I don't think there's a book signing tonight. I think that may have been an old bio that you were looking at. I'm not planning on signing any books tonight, but a lot of what's in this book you're going to hear from me tonight, and I'll explain to you how that works. But if you look at this chart, you can see that there's a lot of different ways to describe the work that we do: new urbanism, smart growth, livable community. But the reason why and this was well before this chart, but the reason why I settled on walkable is because it's a way to communicate good planning practices that everyone can understand. But when you refocus on walkability as your kind of North Star for planning, I think you make a lot of better decisions as a planner. And I just want to say, I know that you guys drive. And I love cars. This is not my car. This was a client's car. But I'm very aware most of the places I give these talks are driving places, right? They're driving places where most people drive, and the landscape forces them to drive, for better or for worse. But everyone wants to have a walkable place in their community, even if it's a driving community. And you're going to find the economics of your city will thrive if you are successful in making that place as good as it can be. So with that very long introduction, tonight's talk will be 2 parts. A little bit of talk about why it's important that we make our places more walkable, and then how to make our places more walkable. That could be a 10-hour talk. In fact, I'll show you at the end. I teach a 2-day course at Harvard every year. It takes 2 days to give this talk, but tonight's kind of the abridged version, so we'll hopefully be out of here in an hour. So let's get into why we need it. I want to talk about 3 different reasons why it's important that we make walkable places. And it's interesting, as a planner, we used to argue for walkability kind of from the planner's playbook. And we talk about, sense of place and procession and temporal experiences and all these highfalutin planner words that no one really understood or cared about. But once the economists and the epidemiologists and the sociologists started talking about the same things, they seemed to get a lot more attention than we did. And so we kind of make our arguments from their playbooks. And so I'm going to talk about each one of them. The economists, Chris Leinberger used to run Robert Charles Lesser and Company, which was one of the biggest real estate companies, advisory companies in the country. He wrote this book a good 15 years ago that really opened our eyes, called The Option of Urbanism. And this book, he was able to write it after WalkScore came out. Have you guys heard of WalkScore? WalkScore rates every community in the U.S. Based on how walkable it is. And it's not 100% accurate, but it's a pretty good metric. So he looked at what he described as walkable urban environments and contrasted them from drivable suburban environments. So he basically said, let's look at real estate prices. Let's look at how people value place in these two types of places. Now, what he found it was in Detroit, people pay a 51% premium for more walkable places. In Denver, they pay a 150% premium. In New York City, they pay a 200% premium to be in a walkable place. So per square foot, per real estate, the house in Greenwich Village around the corner from where the Friends apartment was is worth 3 times as much as the house in Greenwich, which is a very nice house, of course, but it just doesn't have that same benefit. It's about $2,000 per walk score point, and it's a 100-point scale. So that's housing. Office, he found a 27% premium for walkable office versus drivable office. People pay more to be in a walkable place. And then, of course, developers are taking steps to reinvent suburban office parks, particularly first with the bubble burst in '08 and then with COVID. The suburban office became much less valuable than the livable office. This is an article in the New York Times that just says lonely last days in an office park. And then, zombie office parks are a problem. Malls, some are better than others, but the word on the street for about a decade now is that malls have been dying a slow and ugly death. I have these great pictures of abandoned malls that I like to take out when I need inspiration. And I looked up your mall to see how it was doing, and it must be doing all right because the one article I found said it's not dead yet, which I thought was really interesting. So, I think it's, as malls go, yours is pretty strong, but I guess the writing's on the wall because I know a number of the anchors have left and other things have happened that I shop at a mall in the Boston area. There are still some healthy malls, and when you want certain things, they're the place to go. But it's not people's preferred shopping environment. I love this article. This was while COVID was winding down. This was in the Boston Globe, and the North End is our Little Italy neighborhood, and people were complaining about the noise and the rats and other things that were happening with the all the on-street dining that happened with COVID. But look at the picture versus the headline. It's not much of a nightmare. This is the experience, this plein air, out in public with other people around, sidewalk dining. This is kind of the ultimate urban experience. And this is the environment that if you can create it, you will have the most lively economic circumstances. So that's the first category. The second category is epidemiology, and of course, the obesity epidemic is the biggest factor there. This book came out in 2004 called Urban Sprawl and Public Health, written not by planners, but by epidemiologists. And they said, look, we have the first generation of Americans who are expected to live shorter lives than their parents. And that's because we've actually engineered out of our lives the useful walk. It's no longer useful to walk, and so we're not burning the calories. The idea, one of them lent me this slide, the idea that you drive to park, to take the escalator to the gym, to get on the treadmill, to walk, is why we have an unhealthy society. It's not really the weight as much as the other things that the weight makes you susceptible to. And, the U.S. is about the worst among the developed countries. And then Louisiana is in the top 3 in terms of obesity as well. It's an issue. This was our breakfast this morning. The food doesn't help, particularly the crawfish etouffee. But the calories in are only half of it. The other half is the calories out and the fact that we're sitting in traffic instead of walking. And they say driving is the new smoking. But just all the time that you spend in your car is times that you're not really being active. And the proof of that, there's a lot of correlation between the amount of driving societies do and the amount of overweight people, but you look for causality, right? You look for longitudinal studies. And the most wonderful longitudinal study accidentally was done in Beijing, where you had to win a lottery to have the right to purchase a car. And they found out that, when people won, if they were over 50, they gained 22 pounds on average. And if they didn't win, they didn't gain any weight. So just that ability to own a car is going to impact your health in that way. The blue zones, have you guys heard of the blue zones? It's a big movement. Dan Buettner, National Geographic, he goes to different places where people live the longest. And he came out with this list of the Power 9 the lessons from the blue zones. What can I do to live forever? Lesson number 1, move naturally. And what he says is, of course, rather than exercising for sake of exercising, try to make changes to your lifestyle. Ride a bicycle instead of driving, walk to the store instead of driving. The key word there is try, right? Try to make those changes, because in so much of our lives, we don't have the opportunity. Because of the way our cities have been planned, we don't have the opportunity to walk to things or bike to things. This is the conversation about growing old healthily, but in fact, people make the New Year's resolution to exercise, and then a week later they stop. But if this is your lifestyle, if walking is just part of your everyday life, then you're going to be much healthier. So that's part of it. Another part of it, of course, is car crashes. It's not good for your health to get into car crashes, and we are also, among the developed nations, the worst place for those. What's interesting is, by the way, we're actually worse than Russia now in terms of per capita deaths from car crashes. But it's also interesting to compare different parts of the country. So if you look at New York or San Francisco, they have the same number of deaths per 100,000 from driving as Europe, right? Because a lot of people are taking transit, a lot of people aren't in cars. When you're driving, you're less likely to be on a highway, you're going slower speeds. More modern cities like Dallas have much higher. Really recently built cities like Orlando are even higher than that. This is amazing, though. Hillsborough County, Florida, which is the suburban area surrounding Tampa, is what? Almost 20 times as high as New York. Because people are spending most of their time on highways, and they're driving very quickly, and they're driving a lot more. So that's some of the health conversation. Finally, the community conversation. There was a wonderful book from the 80s by Donald Appleyard called Livable Streets. And he found streets that were pretty much identical except for the amount of traffic on them. These are urban streets, not really like your streets here, but these are urban streets. And you can see that what these paths are the paths of people walking and getting around the neighborhood and being with their friends and neighbors. And this is the heavy traffic versus the moderate versus the light traffic street. And not only did people claim as their home territory a much larger area when there were fewer cars on the street, but they actually had more friends. And so this is a line from my book, Walkable City Rules, where I'm summarizing the study. Appleyard found that most people living on light traffic streets considered their entire street to be their home territory, while most people on heavy traffic streets only felt at home within their own buildings or apartments. More remarkably, while people on light traveled streets counted on average 3.0 friends, people on busy streets averaged only 0.9 friends. And I joke, that's hardly the best ad copy. Heavy traffic for those times when you want to have slightly less than one friend. So that's part of the social conversation. The other part, which I think is a real concern, and you see it here, but not uniquely here, you see it everywhere, suburban in the US these days, is the way that we've managed to segregate ourselves incredibly ruthlessly by price point of house and therefore by income. Right? And historically, as a culture, we've segregated ourselves in different ways over the years, race, religion, and other things. But now, if you can afford a $400,000 house, you never have to set foot in the place that has the $300,000 condos. And you don't see each other, and each of you lives behind your own gate. And this can't be healthy for society. We drive down the street and we see these signs. Okay, if you're rich, you go up to the right. If you're poorer, you go straight ahead. But what if they were a little more honest and talked about what's really, happening to our landscape? And it can't be good for society that this is happening. Andres pointed out in that 1989 talk that I mentioned to you, he pointed out how we didn't used to do that, but we did used to segregate by price. This is a block in Georgetown, one of the nicest neighborhoods in America. This street is apartments facing apartments. This street is row houses facing row houses. This street is mansions. And then over here is, one of the fortunes of the mid-Atlantic. But they're all in the same neighborhood. And this idea that you might bump into your doctor or your fireman or your school teacher in your own neighborhood is a really healthy thing. When Andres and Liz were building Kentlands, which is outside of Georgetown, and it's this whole new city that's that's in Gaithersburg, Maryland, they actually said, hey, let's mix different housing types. And what you see in this one slide is a row house next to a garage apartment, next to a mansion, and there's some normal kind of size houses around the corner. Joe Alfondre, who's the developer, his advisor, his real estate advisor said, you can never sell a mansion near a bungalow. You can never sell a bungalow near a row house. You can never sell a row house near an apartment, because he had this suburban mentality of the pods with the gates. But in fact, if you build it right and you make it look like a village, and this is that block now of row houses and garage apartments, houses and mansions all in one block. Actually, this project, I lived for a summer in this garage apartment. It was delightful. These are prices from 2007. They're probably double now, but you can see a wide range of price points from over $1 million to $1,000 a month in the same block. And these are the best prices in the market because people want to live in a village. And actually, when you mix different housing types, it looks like a village and feels like a village. So that's a good lesson as well. So that's just some of 3 conversations we can have about the social, the epidemiological, and the economic impacts of making more walkable places. So let's get on from why we need it to how to do it. And in Walkable City, I have what I call my general theory of walkability. The general theory of walkability asks the question, particularly in America, in which driving is so easy and so cheap, and most people have cars, and the car is there in the driveway between you and everything, and it's so easy to fall into it. How do you get people to make the choice to walk? And the answer is that the walk needs to be as good as the drive. Pretty simple, right? But to do that, it needs to do 4 things simultaneously. It needs to be useful, it needs to be safe, it needs to be comfortable, and it needs to be interesting. And I found that's a really useful framework for discussing walkability. And so the rest of this talk, I'm going to go through each of these categories, useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting, and think about what it might mean for you and for St. George. So the useful walk is a lesson I learned from Andres and Liz many years ago. Andres used to give a talk called The Story of Planning about how in the 19th century people were choking on the soot of the dark satanic mills, and the planners said, hey, let's move the housing away from the factories. And they did that, and lifespans increased immediately and dramatically, and the planners were hailed as heroes, and we like to say they've been trying to repeat that experience ever since. So you have the onset of what's called Euclidean zoning based on the court case that made it legal, Supreme Court case. The idea that the landscape should be separated into large areas of distinct use, single family, separate from multifamily, separate from retail, separate from office, which is separate from medical office, and this was taught in planning school for a generation. It's no longer taught in planning school, but usually when I arrive at a place to do a plan, there's already a plan in place that looks like this that you have to undo if you want to have a walkable place. Clearly it's not walkable because if it's a large area of only one thing, then the other thing you might walk to, the other thing that might be useful to you, is too far apart from you to walk to it. So, this is the opposite. This is probably technically the most walkable place in America. It's not always great to walk there, but more people are walking in Manhattan than anywhere else in the US per capita. And you can see that the grain of the uses is much finer. It's much more like confetti. This red color is actually vertically mixed use, where you have offices or apartments above shops. So you can see how fine-grained it is. Now, I was an art history major. They say that wasn't the most lucrative choice. But I can tell you that you don't want a Rothko when you're a planner. You don't want the blob guy. You don't want a Rothko. You want a Seurat. Seurat was the pointillist. So the value of an art history education, the finer the grain, the better. Also the value of an art history education, you know you're named after this gentleman who killed the dragon. So it's appropriate that you're taking on this task of creating a new place because it's a big job. So this leads me to the fundamental kind of new urbanist conversation, which is that there's only 2 tested ways to make communities. There's a million ways to make a city, but there's only 2 that we've tested by the thousands. And one is the traditional neighborhood, and the other is suburban sprawl. Right? The traditional neighborhood, this is Newburyport, Massachusetts, near where I live. It's defined as being compact, diverse, and walkable. It's compact. The traditional neighborhood is almost always about a 5-minute walk from edge to center. You're looking at about at 2 different neighborhoods of Newburyport. Almost always across cultures throughout history, they've been about a 5-minute walk from edge to center, so about a half a mile across. And you find that just about everywhere. It's diverse. There are bigger houses and smaller houses, places to live, places to work, places to worship, places to shop. The main streets down here, places to recreate. Most of your daily needs are within walking distance. That's the useful walk. And then actually, because there's lots of streets, no one street needs to be that big. And so that's what makes it walkable. So compact, diverse, and walkable. In contrast, you have sprawl, which is, clearly not compact. That's the name sprawl. Not diverse. A whole square mile can hold just one use or one house over and over again. And it's not walkable because, look, there's lots of streets, but very few of them go anywhere. And this lack of connectivity means those few streets that do connect have only one job, and that's moving as many cars as possible, as fast as possible. We call them traffic sewers. And like sewers, they're a blight. They're noxious. You'll notice there's not a single address on any of these streets. The houses all turn their backs, and all they do is move cars as fast as they can. So actually, you're 300% more likely to be killed as a pedestrian in this environment than this environment. So it's not walkable. It's fun to break sprawl down into its constituent parts, the places where you only live, where you only work, where you only shop. Schools get bigger and bigger, and this is an issue that I know you pay a lot of attention to, but when you consolidate schools, that means you have a bigger school and it's further away. So this trend, which is national towards school consolidation, actually makes walking to school much less likely. When I was young, half of us walked to school. Now 11% of American kids walk to school. And then supersizing athletic facilities as well. This is Weston, west of Fort Lauderdale, very proud of their 8 soccer fields and 8 baseball diamonds. But the kid who lives here actually has a 2.5-mile drive to get to the sports field because of the way the community was designed. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you think everyone's going to be driving, then you design environments like this without thinking twice about it. So the part everyone forgot to count. If you're going to separate every use from every other use and then reconnect it only with automotive infrastructure, then your highway system, this is not Photoshop, this is LA. Your highway system has to be the workhorse in putting everything back together, and you get congestion. So I always tell people, for many Americans, this is the American dream. The house only with other houses around it. But the dream comes with the nightmare of getting from that house to everything else. And the amount that we have to invest, this is in Massachusetts, the amount that we have to invest in horizontal infrastructure so that you're never waiting 2 cycles at a light is extraordinary. The experience can be very unpleasant. This is not Photoshop either. This is, Walter Kulash took this image in Florida. It's tough on families. The longer your commute, the more likely you are to be divorced, is a statistic. Driving can be a real drag. Sorry, it's a church, I shouldn't show that. And being a pedestrian can be worse. So these are the 2 models, and we're moving on, but I just want you to really look at this image, because it's the same stuff. It's places to work, places to live, places to shop, institutions. But how big is it? How far apart is it? And do you have this nice network of small streets and small blocks? Because in this environment, you're going to be driving all the time. So those are the 2 models. That's the useful walk. The safe walk as a planner is where I end up spending most of my time because it's the thing that cities can fix the fastest. And a lot of cities, if you think about the 4 categories, the useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting walk, the useful walk, the comfortable, and the interesting walk are all a function of the stuff that's around the streets, and a lot of it's private. And as a city, you can control that with zoning and with investment, but it takes a long time. And most cities want to become walkable much more quickly. They say, what can we do to be more walkable now? And I say, well, you probably have a lot of streets that could be made safer. And so we look for those opportunities, particularly in old downtowns. We have a pedestrian death, traffic violence epidemic in the US. You're 78% more likely to be killed as a pedestrian than you were 15 years ago. Number of reasons that we can't fix quickly, size of our vehicles, the amount of driving that people are doing. But what we can do is make our streets safer and basically just get people to go the speed limit. And in the communities I work where people don't want congestion, and neither do I say, look, I don't say let's slow the cars down. I say let's get the drivers to go the speed limit. That's all we're trying to do. And there's this bizarre phenomenon in the US that distinguishes us from Europe, where we design our streets with elbow room. Because community street design in the US grew out of highway design, the engineers for many years thought that what made highways safe, which was forgiveness and elbow room, would also make neighborhood streets safe. But they didn't realize that the forgiveness and the elbow room is what causes the speeding. And so actually, it's by eliminating those things that make streets more forgiving and give you more elbow room that you can stop the speeding. And so what are the things that we can perhaps look at? The first is the number of lanes. Does a street have more lanes than it needs? You have a lot of streets that don't have more lanes than they need, and some you might feel they need more lanes. But you also have streets that have extra lanes. But it's important, and I share this message wherever I go, it's important to understand that adding lanes will not solve your traffic problem. And I hope you guys know that, but if you don't, I'm going to really lay on it for a minute right now. You know, this is Salt Lake City, where the typical street is about 6 lanes wide. This is my family. We're part of it, waving flags as they cross the street. I thought these were pretty hilarious to have these flags by the street. But then last year I discovered Granville Island in Vancouver. They've got a new program that's called Grab a Brick. So they have these buckets by the side of the road, and you grab a brick and you wave it at traffic so that no one runs you down. You make eye contact, put it back when you're done. But this is Canada, actually, so that they're really nice there. These are foam bricks. They're not real bricks. In any case, when a street is congested, when it's full of cars, of course, the first thing that every natural thing that any person's going to think is, oh, if we have more lanes, we can handle this traffic. And that would be great if it worked. You know, when you're here on this street, you think you might want some more lanes. This is ideal traffic planning. Purple is the capacity, yellow is the traffic. When the traffic exceeds the capacity, you have congestion. If you can only widen that street, then you absorb the congestion. And the question is, does this ever happen? And the answer is, it never happens. And the reason it never happens is because of what's called induced traffic, induced demand. In congested systems, the only way that most of us really pay to drive, because if you look at the numbers, driving is heavily subsidized. There was a study in Massachusetts. The average family in Massachusetts is paying $12,000 a year in taxes to subsidize driving. That's more than we pay to drive. We pay about $9,000 to drive, and we pay $12,000 in taxes, whether we drive or not, to subsidize driving. So that means that if you have a car, the smart thing to do is to drive it all the time. And the way that you pay to drive is being stuck in traffic. You're paying with your time. So when you reduce the cost, the time cost of driving, people make different choices, right? When the lanes clear out, people move further away from their jobs, or they drive more at peak hour, or they make trips that they would not have made otherwise. And so those are the induced trips that happen whenever you widen a street. This is the study that documented it a number of years ago. Very straightforward. Actually, I have no idea what this means, but I know what this means, which is that the data show that in every roadway expansion that was studied, of the new capacity that was added, immediately 40% of it was taken up by new trips, and within 4 years, 100% of it was taken up by new trips. So because, as I suggested, in congested systems, the principal constraint to driving is congestion. So this is an equilibrium. This is a choice that people are making every day, that they've chosen to drive at that time. And so when highways are widened, right, the highway widening was done, we have charts of this for almost every highway widening. Within 4 years, you're back where you started. 405 freeway in Los Angeles. So let that sink in. But also worth noting, in some communities, including yours, not all of them, is the fact that people are making cut-throughs. people have a choice. I had a choice getting here tonight of either taking I-10 or taking Perkins Road. I'm not saying that you're thinking about widening Perkins Road. I don't think you are. But if you were to widen Perkins Road, all you would really achieve is pulling trips off of I-10. People are, especially now with Waze-enabled maps, and if you're using a map system, you're being told where the fastest way to go is. You don't even need to be using maps. Other people are. And as long as a small group of people are using maps, then you're going to end up with an equilibrium where anything you add to Perkins Road is going to take trips off of I-10. And of course, there's other cut-throughs as well that are happening. So you also need to keep in mind that new roads that you add, new capacity that you add, you will not get rid of your congestion. There may be reasons to add roads, but just don't think that solving congestion is the reason, because it isn't. So that's that. But you also have some roads that are wider than they need to be. This was Oklahoma City, where I was called in by the mayor, who I met at the Mayor's Institute that I told you about, because Prevention Magazine, in their Best Walking Cities issue, named Oklahoma City the worst city for pedestrians in the entire country. And he said, oh my gosh, what do we do? And I said, let's do a walkability study. And he said, what's that? And I said, I don't know. I haven't done one yet, but let's figure it out. And I've since done about 20 of them. And what we did was we looked at the car counts in the downtown core in Oklahoma City, knowing, and any engineer will tell you, that a two-lane street, without turn lanes, a two-lane street will handle 10,000 cars a day. And we looked at these streets in the downtown that were 8,000, 6,000, 5,000 cars per day, and we noticed that they were 6-lane roads. They were basically 4 to 6-lane roads, handling the traffic of 2-lane roads mostly. This could have been a 2-lane road. And so what we identified, which you don't find everywhere, but you find most cities have 1 or 2 streets like this, or many, is you find this mismatch between supply of lanes and demand for lanes. And those are the lanes that you can eliminate without causing any congestion. So that's what we did. It so happened Devon Energy was building this tower, this 51-story tower in the downtown. It was generating $200 million in tax increment. And they said, what should we spend that on? Basically the same day that my study was completed. And they decided to rebuild the 40-block downtown core, all the streets from building face to building face, based on this new standard of the right number of lanes. So I actually eliminated a third of the lanes. I doubled the amount of on-street parking, which is great for shopping, and added a bike lane system. And so a typical street like this, 4-lane one-way is now a 2-lane two-way. Another 4-lane one-way, 2-lane two-way plus tram. They added a streetcar. This is the biggest street through the downtown. It became this. So I always tell communities, this is what you do when you have money. Right? You can rebuild your streets this way. You don't need to rebuild. You can restripe. Most communities I work in don't have that kind of money, and they choose not to reconstruct very much, but they lay down a new top coat, and they just change the striping to match the demand. Okay, that was number of lanes. Number 2, the width of the lanes. Andre Stwani used to show this slide, and he'd say, the typical street to the typical subdivision in America is now wide enough to allow you to experience the curvature of the earth. And it's true, because the standards have shifted. This is a subdivision from the 60s. This is a subdivision from the 80s. Same height of airplanes, same size of house, 60s, 80s. Look what happened to our street design. It just gets wider and wider for a lot of reasons we don't need to get into, but the wider the lanes are, the faster people go. And of course, the faster they go, the more dangerous they are. Thank goodness we now have NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, getting us back to what used to be the standard. Now, this is not a neighborhood lane with just a few houses on a street. This is an urban or a regionally scaled driving lane, 10 feet. A lot of cities have 12-foot lanes. You have some 12-foot lanes. 10 feet is ample, as you can see, and that's the standard that we're now sharing. However, in local communities, in single-family communities or row house communities where there aren't that many people on a street, we do something else that's called a skinny street. This is the program from Portland, Oregon, where they actually say you can fit 2 cars in 12 feet. How do we do that? Well, it's just like the street many of us grew up on. If someone's coming at you, you duck into the parking lane and you just work your way. This is the kind of street we played street hockey on and touch football on because it was a safe place to be a kid. So that's what we build in our new communities. This is Ion, which is outside of, it's in Mount Pleasant, so outside of Charleston. You guys probably know Mount Pleasant. Vince Graham is the developer of Ion, wonderful guy, great public speaker. He goes around the South and speaks at conferences, quotes this philosopher appropriately in this house of God. Broad is the road that leads to destruction. Narrow is the road that leads to life. And he does well in the South with that message. So, that's the width of the lanes. What else do we see here? Parallel parking. People are like, oh, you must hate parking because, you know, you like walking and there's cars littering up the street. I love parallel parking. Parallel parking is an essential barrier of steel that protects the sidewalk from moving vehicles. It also contributes tremendously to street life and activity, but mostly it makes that curb feel safe. This is Fort Lauderdale, where we did a walkability study, and before the study was implemented, you could see there's one lane into town at rush hour. This is happy hour, rush hour. 2 lanes out of town. This is a happy hour street called Himmershey Boulevard. This was happy hour on the parked side of the street, and this was happy hour on the unparked side of the street. They both served the same bad fish sandwich, but one side the curb was protected and the other side it wasn't. And then the other part of this picture is street trees. Street trees used to be something that the engineers frowned upon before the studies were done, but then the studies showed that actually on the same street, in several locations, most famously in Orlando, on the same street, the segment that had trees on it had fewer injuries, fewer deaths, fewer crashes than the segment that didn't have trees on it. Mostly because trees slow cars down, sometimes dramatically. But, you know, better to hit a tree than a pedestrian, but, you know, most of the time what the trees are doing is causing people to drive more cautiously, not this person. And when you line them up on the edge of a street, you of course get that nice sense of protection. They almost make a wall when you view them in perspective. So we love street trees for safety. This is a Dutch artist's interpretation of what a street feels like without the parked cars, without the street trees on the edge. And then what I call vocabulary. You know, what is the street telling you in terms of its graphics? Like, are there swoops? Are there pork chops? Are there other kind of highway shapes that tell you it's a driving place and not a walking place? This is funny. It says, some say the entrance to city center is not inviting to pedestrians. This is in Las Vegas. So what's the radius of curvature of the corner? Is it 2 feet like we saw last night in New Orleans? This happens to be Tallahassee, but is it 2 feet or is it 40 feet? And clearly fire trucks and other vehicles need to get through, but these are regularly oversized just in case. But of course that just in case means that the car doesn't have to slow down when it makes the turn. And when you cross a 20-foot street, you're not crossing 20 feet, you're crossing like 40 feet because of the big swoop. So a lot of changes that we're seeing made in cities are fixing intersections like this by just tightening them up. And sometimes based on the vehicle that's going through, you need a mountable curb or some other trick, but you tighten them up and they become much more comfortable. We were taken through this intersection today that I'm sure most of you know and complain about, Valhalla, PQ, Peekaboo, and Highland Road. And, you know, the reason why there's a number of reasons why it's not safe, but the principal one is that it's kind of got highway engineering, swoops and stripes, and it's not a right angle. It's a lot of asphalt, more than you need. And I did a quick hotel plan, so this is the current configuration, and you could easily just do this to it. And I know that it's being redesigned, replanned. There was a discussion of putting in a traffic circle, which doesn't fit. I don't think a roundabout doesn't really fit. But this does fit. And just keeping it as a two-way stop, you know, where these guys are stopping to before they enter, just tightening it up like that would make a really big difference in terms of the safety of the street. Just one example. The last 2 categories are quite quick, so we're almost done. The comfortable walk is a little counterintuitive because we all like to climb mountains and get big views and, see the landscape, but actually the evolutionary biologists tell us that all animals, including humans, we're simultaneously seeking prospect and refuge. And prospect means you can see your predators before they attack you, right? This is in our bones from evolution. And refuge means that your flanks feel covered from attack. And if you don't feel your flanks are covered, you don't feel comfortable, fully comfortable in a space. So a plaza is only as good as its walls, a street is only as good as its edges, and we've been talking for some time about what the best ratios are of height to width. 3-to-1 is great, 1-to-1 was the Renaissance ideal. Beyond 1-to-6, you don't really feel enclosed anymore, and you're a little less comfortable. So, 6-to-1 in Salzburg can be fantastic. The opposite of Salzburg, of course, is Houston in the 80s. This neighborhood's much better now, but I always show this slide to remind people that it's the surface parking lot that's the principal villain in this argument, in this experience. When we arrived in Baton Rouge in 98, probably, we went up in a tower, and what we saw was a perfect checkerboard, where for every block with a building on it, there were 4 blocks around it that had parking lots. And literally, there was almost nowhere in downtown Baton Rouge where you had a building across the street from a building, creating that sense of refuge in place. And of course, one of the great accomplishments of not just the plan, but the work that folks did in the intervening quarter century is that now a lot of those streets are lined by buildings on both sides. So, a parking lot, I don't care if you put tables in it. A parking lot is a parking lot. This is Europe. This is in Madrid. Look at this outdoor living room that a king built. You can get in all these different streets, but it's basically a beautifully shaped space. And that's the difference between traditional urbanism and modern urbanism, or modernist urbanism. Traditional urbanism, the space gets the shaping, and the buildings are left over. The buildings are whatever they need to be to shape the space. Whereas modern, and that's, this is the way it feels. Modern urbanism is the opposite. So I have this collection of pictures of places from all around the world. I can't name them all. I can't remember where I was in every one. This is where I'm from, right? Boston, Croatia, somewhere in Holland probably, Germany, Bari in Italy, Rome, American cities too, Dubai and Portugal and Turkey and France, and I'm going to stop naming them. But this is my little collection of just the best places in the world. The places I like. I mean, nature is great, but if you like culture and you like cities, these are the places we go. This is where we spend our money in order to travel to experience great places that, you just pay money to get on a plane just to walk around these places because they feel so great, right? That was Telluride. They feel so great. And I realized after looking at these slides for a while that they all have one thing in common, which is that you can't see out. I mean, you're really in a room. All those slides I showed you, every single one, you couldn't see out of the space. And so, that's why I really love Perkins Row. I think it's a great success. It has a great height to width ratio. I know it's kind of new and it's had better times and worse times, but it's proper city making, where you have a mix of uses, you have housing, you have shopping, and you have that spatial definition. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. It's pretty perfect. I don't know who did it. They did a good job. We're still in this comfort category. Trees are super important. I don't have time tonight. I have a whole lecture on trees. I've become a much bigger tree hugger than I used to be because I've learned all the things that trees do. So forgive me, I don't have time to explain all these things. I have data. Some of these are obvious. Some of these are completely counterintuitive. I have data backing up everything I'm about to tell you in the next 15 seconds. That trees clean our water and reduce flooding, which I know you care about. They clean our air, they sustain wildlife and the food web, they fight climate change. They improve our health, they eliminate urban heat islands, they reduce car crashes, they reduce crime, they create community, they cut energy costs, they increase property values, and they help businesses. If we could monetize, even for the stuff that we can monetize, trees pay cities back instantly, and not instantly, but trees pay city investment back quickly and in multiples. And the stuff you can't monetize, of course, like saving the planet, are also important. But trees are really an incredible investment, and I hope you realize what amazing trees you grow here and how easy it is to grow trees here compared to Oklahoma City and 100 other places we've worked. And I hope that trees are a big part of your path to economic resilience. You all know Greenville, one of the nicest towns in South Carolina. Greenville built its entire reputation around being green on this incredible shopping street. Lawrence Halpern, landscape architect, designed this shopping street. But what people don't know is that it's really just one, like, look at Greenville. Like, most of it's not green. But they put the trees where the people were, and they developed a whole reputation. The name didn't hurt. They developed a whole reputation around one incredible street full of trees. And that's a real lesson as well. The last category is the interesting walk. I talked about how the Renaissance ideal was 1-to-1, height to width ratio. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. This is Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, people have been to Grand Rapids, pretty walkable downtown. But no one wants to walk on this street, which connects the two best hotels. Because when one side of the street is a exposed parking deck and the other side is a conference facility, apparently designed in admiration for the parking deck, it's just boring, right? These long horizontal lines, this lack of faces and people. So we have to hide our parking. Mayor Riley, a friend of mine, mayor of Charleston for 40 years, taught us that it only takes 20 feet of building to hide 200 feet of parking. And this is a technique that's become standard. It exists at Perkins Row as well. This is one in Miami Beach. I call it the Chia Pet Garage, right? The parking is set back, the storefronts are preserved and enhanced. This is in Arkansas, but you can see this is how developers, smart developers, build housing now. The parking decks are embedded and hidden behind the buildings. So that's an important lesson to make walking interesting. Took this photo this morning. This is one of my favorite parking lots, right? This is in New Orleans. You wouldn't know it if you didn't see the car there. I'm guessing this is from the 20s, maybe the 30s. It's not an old building they put parking in. It probably was built this way. But the idea that parking doesn't have to look like parking in your would-be walkable areas, right? You've got a city that's going to be 95%. Geographically, your city is going to be 95% drivable and 5% walkable. And everything I've told you tonight is about those 5%. But that's okay. That's a lot of walkable cities have that same ratio. But they've really invested in that one place where people come together to leave their cars. You know, like Perkins Row, we call it a park once environment. You drive there, if you don't live there, because eventually people can make the choice to live in these places, and then they enjoy that lifestyle in an ongoing way. But for most people, they drive there and they park once and they don't look at their car for 4 or 5 hours. And that's an amazing experience that is a foundation for economic growth. So finally, and I don't show this group of slides in many places, but regionalism is the secret sauce of placemaking when you have a distinct region, which you have, right? The great architect Leon Creer, who just died, but he was a godfather to the new urbanists, made these cartoons, you know, attacking modernist architecture and basically saying, you know, if you're in Santa Fe, it looks like Santa Fe. If you're in Switzerland, it should look like Switzerland. If you're in Tuscany, make it look like Tuscany. But this rewards travel, and this does not reward travel. The international style, which is what they called it in the early 20th century, does not give you any pleasure for moving around the world. And we want to give people that, to make our places special. So, you know, our project near Georgetown looks like Georgetown. Our project in Alabama looks like Alabama. This is Ion, again, outside of Charleston, looks like Charleston. Wisconsin looks like Wisconsin, and Mexico looks like Mexico, etc. And that's something that you can really take advantage of here because you do have a distinct architectural heritage and distinct architectural culture. And I actually didn't see as much of that at play in Perkins Row and some of your other projects as you could have, to really celebrate the fact that you're in a unique place where the culture, the materials that were available, the people who came to build it historically, and the climate caused you to look different from other places. And I think that's worth celebrating, to make you more interesting. So that's the whole deal. Useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting. I did want to go on a little bit to talk about a model that you might find interesting. we've done a lot of work in Carmel, Indiana. Has anyone been to Carmel, Indiana? It's a suburb of Indianapolis, so already there it's a driving place. It's outside of a larger city. It is always winning these awards. Second best place to live in America. First best place if you're a medium-sized city. Of course, best place to live in Indiana. The mayor is Jim Brainerd, who was my client for many years. He's now the senior advisor to Speck Dempsey. We liked him so much we put him on the team. He built, I think, 173 roundabouts in that city and reduced traffic crashes by over 50%. But he also did a lot of investment in what became his downtown. This is the plan that I did back in 2012. And what was really interesting about Carmel is they had an old Main Street that wasn't much, but he brought it back as a Main Street. And then they had a civic center down here with City Hall and a concert hall and some other things. And in between was just a disused industrial zone. And he allowed us to plan this zone that had a trail in the middle. It had a rails-to-trail trail called the Monon Trail, just surrounded with one-story industrial buildings of low value. And we did a plan that we put a street around the trail that looked like this. So we kept the trail in the middle, and then we said, let's make an avenue around the trail because it won't be active unless it's fronts, and it won't really be fronts unless it's a street. And people thought that was a crazy idea to blight the nature trail with cars and a street until it was built. This is the drawing. Sorry, this is the drawing. Drawing becomes reality, and this limited investment that wasn't cheap has generated, 20 times as much private investment as the public investment was made. It looks like this now. It's got, a shuffleboard, it's got ping pong, it's got climbing structures, it's got bike trails and running trails. But what's amazing is all the stuff that grew up around it. So all this investment surrounding the trail. And I used to say, you've got a bipolar. I said, Mayor, you've got a bipolar city. He's like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you got this piece, and they don't connect. Now he has one downtown. It's half a mile long, and it's all connected. But this idea of, a limited amount of public investment to generate a lot of private investment through placemaking is really what made Carmel into the success that it is now. And this is a typical, nice day, but a typical nice day on this trail. These people were wondering why I took their picture, and I was like, I designed this. You don't get to say that very often. You get old enough, you get to say it. So I do think, and here's why I'm very reluctant to opine so soon. I mean, I've been in your city. I mean, you've not been in a city that long, but I've been in it much shorter time. I've been in it for one day. But I did study it beforehand, and I talked to different folks. And I think there's a lot of places where, if you're going to create a new downtown, there's a lot of places where you could do that. I am drawn to the spot. I don't want you to take this as a more important pronouncement than it is, because honestly, I want to make it clear. I've not been here a long time, and I'm just getting to know your city. But certain things that I've learned about city making point to this area adjacent to Perkins Row, between Perkins Row and the mall, essentially, as the most prime piece of real estate in your city. Two main things. The first thing is that there's already a lot of energy and walkability there. And that's why I think the Carmel example is really helpful, because it was bipolar and it became one. Walkability loves walkability. Concentration, this is in one of my books, concentration, not dispersion, is the elixir of urbanity. Concentration, not dispersion, is the elixir of urbanity. You want to have one place that's absolutely great, and that's going to create all the energy. And I'll tell a brief story. I'm sure I've used up my time, but in the 1990s, when I was at DPZ, everyone said, you got to see Denver. Denver's doing amazing things. It's like, okay. So we got in a plane and we went to Denver. It wasn't Denver, it was Lodo, like the Lodo neighborhood. And back then, it wasn't even Lodo. It was one block of Lodo. It was the Wynkoop Brewery and the ski train station and a few other things, that just all in one block. But it was great. And that one block was lifting all of Lodo, and Lodo was lifting all of Denver. And the reputation of the city was soaring because of just one little spot. And the lesson we learned from that is, and Andres always says this, start small and start perfect. Make something small as great as it can be, and once it's great, start radiating outward. But don't drop the walkability fairy dust, all over your city and hope that you're being fair to everyone. Because walkability, as I showed you, it's so hard. You got to do those 4 things all in one place. You got to do them well. And so you really want to pick a winner and make the winner as good as it can be. I think that it's imperfect, but Perkins Row is damn good. And then you have this large area right next to it, and then you have the energy of the mall. You have the street, which is planned to connect through. You have the pedestrian opportunity here already. And interestingly, here's the second thing. There's a theory in planning based on the observation of existing cities that when suburbs surround a metropolis, the centers of those suburbs always tend to gravitate towards the metropolis. So you find this historically in larger cities. I had to do the drawing because I couldn't find the book, but I read it not too long ago. I had to do the drawing myself at the hotel. But this is also where, kind of where Perkins Row in that area is. So from a strictly theoretical city planning perspective, it's a logical place where that historically might have ended up anyway. So that's something to think about as well. So that's all I have to share with you tonight. Again, this is just a first dive. I could be wrong, but I just wanted to share what I could since I don't know when I'll be back. I always like to end with some resources. I mentioned Walkable City. There will not be a book signing tonight. You can buy it somewhere. Make sure when you buy it, you get the new version that has the green stripe on the cover, which is the version I added 100 pages 2 years ago, based on stuff I'd learned in the last 10 years. And then there's the TED Talks that were mentioned. One of them is the Why Talk. It looks like this. And more popular is the How Talk that looks like this. But they're both only 15 minutes long. So if you have friends who couldn't make it tonight and they can't be convinced to watch the video, then ask them to spend a mere 15 minutes on one of these. I teach a class I mentioned at Harvard every summer. Anyone can go. It's 2 days. This year it's in May. Because it's at Harvard, it's expensive. But you get a piece of paper that makes it look like you graduated from Harvard. So it's probably worth it. All of these resources and others can be found at our website, Speck Dempsey, which is here, speckdempsey.com. And thank you for your attention. Are we doing questions, comments? I'm happy to.
Yeah, if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you. We can do a few minutes of Q&A. Do you have a second?
Oh, but there's more from the larger design team. Will that be after the questions? Yes. Okay. It'll be after the questions.
That's an affirmative. All right, so if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll come to you. This is your chance. Anything you want to know about city planning, it's all right here. Oh, you're good. Well, good. I was getting lonely.
Hi, thank you very much. I remember the original 2000 study for downtown Baton Rouge. And we moved away and we've just moved back, so my memory is not real clear. But I recall that there was a really big problem with heat, that a walking city in this area would really pose some problems. How are we going to get around that?
Well, climate matters. There's a number of things that matter, but they're not unbeatable, right? Climate matters. Topography matters. Most places I work will tell you that they have the worst weather in the world, right? Here, it's somewhat accurate. But, people get on planes to go to New Orleans to walk, even in the summer, and we all know that they share your climate, pretty much. But to answer your question, there's only so much you can do, but shadows and trees. So the spatial definition I described that shapes spaces also creates shade. That's really important. But the trees make a huge difference. Will it be lovely in the summer? No. Will people choose to walk? Yes, if you get everything else right. Yeah, that's true.
Do you mind going back to the slide that you made of the PQ? Can you say it? can you say Piku?
Oh, yeah.
Piku and Highland, and just talk about the advantages of I guess that'd be a traffic signal, turn lanes
Oops.
versus the roundabout, because I know
I'm
that's
going
been-
the wrong way. Hold on. You know, can I say it's about 1,000 slides back? Could our hosts be kind enough to go back to right before the comfortable walk? So it's towards the end of the safe walk. It's about halfway there. Oh, brilliant. So this is the existing conditions. And this in green is the addition to the curbs. So this could be, this intersection is broad enough so that if you do exactly what I've shown here, you're going to have a semi jumping the curb on occasion. So you probably want to have rollover curbs and maybe some cobblestone on the edge. But what I've shown is essentially where you want non-giant vehicles to stay within this roadway. And so some form of curb delineation and then grass or some other surface. There's no sidewalks here. People aren't walking here. I was going to draw crosswalks, and I saw there were no sidewalks to approach the crosswalks, so I didn't. But the just necking this down, particularly so that these guys can't go whew like that, right, is going to be the principal safety addition. And then pulling this a little bit further out of the intersection by building that up. And tightening this, right? Right now, this comes out in two wide areas, but you would just skirt it. I'm skirting everything left so that basically this lines up like that. Was there more of a question about it? Yeah, so a roundabout requires about 120 feet of area. I didn't measure it. My guess looking at the different waterways was that wouldn't fit here, but I could be wrong. They are designing one. So if you make sure that, there's a difference between a rotary and a roundabout. I'm from New England where we have rotaries. Rotaries are big and fast. A modern roundabout, and here's the thing to check, curb to curb, it should only be 100 feet. So the outer edge, well, you're an engineer. So the outer edge, so Stephanie, the outer edge, are you doing it? No. Okay. Okay. Is your firm doing it? No. Okay. Okay. The outer edge of the circle should be no more than 100 feet, and probably no less. But that's the size of a modern roundabout. You want to make sure it's not bigger. But if that'll fit, that's fine. They're safe. Roundabouts, we don't do that many roundabouts because they're not that urban and walkable. They're more of an automotive environment, but they are very safe. Yeah.
Yeah, please do not cross the street at Highland to PQ. We got any more questions? Are y'all ready to go play with the map?
Could we go forward to the end so that Lionheart has their slides up? I'll take more questions too.
Hi, I found it very interesting. Could you go back to the slide that showed that area that you thought would be a great town
Yeah, that's
center?
right. That's right here. Why is this going reversed? Sorry, guys. Oh, this is the very end. Got it. Okay. So close your eyes. Don't want to give away the other show.
Right. Okay.
So there's the Bible College here,
Right.
which is not fully using the land that's available and the other stuff in the area and open space as well.
Yeah, so my old roommate, he was a startup guy, developer, and he and some investors got into a long, drawn-out situation with Jimmy Swaggart over that property, and he wanted to develop that. He thought it was just ideal to develop, even with Perkins Row, on the other side of Dawson's Creek, and make that a huge development. A lot of water, because that's where we're all about water here. And maybe even turning Dawson's Creek into a nice area where you could paddle, from back and forth and all that. And so it just, it blew me away to hear you say that would be a good location. And it does make sense.
I'm sure there are impediments. And,
Well, yeah.
I know you guys want to see change happen quickly. We plan in 20-year increments. And there's a reason for that. Andre Stwani used to say, if there's someone in your way, they'll probably be dead in 20 years. It's on the floor outside, but basically it's wrapping the mall.
Yeah, that side of Bluebonnet is St. George, with the exception of the mall area. The other side of Bluebonnet's unincorporated. Yeah, the mall minus some of the department stores. Kind of weird.
By the way, I didn't mention it, but even the mall came in and built kind of a main street. You see that? Was that done? That was done later, right? Yeah. The first step to trying to save malls was to make a main street. Then people realized, oh, well, it's a main street, so we should put something above the shops.
Well,
right?
Jeff, real quick, the first way to save that mall would have been not annexing into Baton Rouge. Any more questions? Very good.
I'm introducing Abby from Lionheart.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to be really quick. And that was really inspiring. I'm inspired. I hope everybody's inspired. That's the purpose of really having Jeff here and to talk to everybody at the beginning of this. So at the beginning of this process of a comprehensive plan for the city of St. George, we're really excited to be part of it. I don't know if I can am I going the right way? All right. What I really wanted to just cover with you guys is to stay involved. We are here. We're at the very beginning of this. We're defining the vision, the goals, how we're going to measure whether we've achieved those goals. But we're at the very beginning. This is a year-long process, and what we know about comprehensive plans and about planning efforts is that the more people that are involved now and all the way through, the more opportunity there is for this to actually be implemented and used down the line. So encourage you guys to really stay involved. How you can do that, we've got activities outside. Please partake in those. We've got a website it's going to be going live right after this. It'll be going live next week. So you'll be able to get on there. You'll be able to provide feedback. You'll see everything that's coming up. We'll also have a survey that's going to go out that we would ask you all to share. We've got your email addresses, so you'll be getting an email when that comes. We ask you to take it and to share it with all your friends. I would also say that the biggest way that a plan like this can be implemented is by y'all being ambassadors for it. Talk to your colleagues, your neighbors, get other people involved. This is a big opportunity, and we're really excited to be here. We won't take any more of your night, but thanks, Jeff. It was really inspiring and a great way to start this.
All right, last thing. Once again, thank you to Jeff Speck and Speck Dempsey. Thank you to Lionheart for being here. In St. George, we've got a really early tradition we've started of participation. We have the highest voter turnout in the parish every single election. We have changed how the parish is being governed because of our voter turnout. This process should be the exact same way. Show up, participate, and have a say. You're the part of the solution. We have problems. And the only way to do that is to solve the problems and work together. So participate like we have to create the city. Participate like we do every election, whether it's a tax, a judge, or a mayor. Participate in building the city, and let's build a great St. George. So welcome to the city of St. George, and welcome to tomorrow. So thank you for tonight. Thank you to Grace Life Fellowship Church. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you. Good night.